the engineering community has built this capacity that we depend upon every year. Most of us never think twice about it, and we have reliable water coming out of our tap. It is a miracle of modern technology that this stuff exists.
Marty Ralph, director of the Center for Western Weather and Water Extremes, or CW3E, is talking about the vast water network in the state, a system of groundwater basins, as well as above-ground storage and conveyance like levees, reservoirs, canals, and aqueducts that not only store but move water around the state. Most of this set up to avoid winter floods and use melting snowpack for water supply in the summer. But the weather was vastly different when management rules were written and reservoirs went online in the 1940s.
When those rules were created, they largely didn't incorporate weather forecasts of precipitation because those forecasts were so bad. Well, they've improved a lot.
In part due to the work Ralph and fellow scientists are doing at the CW3E, researching how to better forecast large storms like atmospheric rivers that can deliver both beneficial rain but also devastating floods, a fundamental piece of information needed for reservoir operations.
For some of these things, you can't be up at the top of completely full because you don't have enough time to get enough water out before more water starts coming in from the storms.
For partners like the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, improved forecasts are adding new flexibility to rules that dictate when to let water out and when to keep it in.
Since our understanding is improving about how the atmosphere and the climate is, we have a better understanding of what these projects can do for us.
Opening the door for programs like the Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations, or FIRO. Tested on Lake Mendocino during the 2019 and 2020 water years, water storage increased by 19% by integrating improved weather forecasting. Even with better surface water management, the state needs more. And that's when we turn to what's called groundwater, a natural underground system that has the capacity to hold nearly 20 times the amount of our surface water system.
What's beneath our feet are about 500 plus groundwater basins in the state that are really important to our state's water supply.
Springhorn says in drought years, groundwater can supply up to 60% of our water needs, but it's been largely unchecked. That's why the state is now requiring water basin managers to submit sustainability plans that meet standards under the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA.
It really is a key piece in the overall strategy for our drought resiliency and water resiliency in California.
Up until now, knowing where and how to store this type of water has been somewhat limited, but a new program called Aerial Electromagnetic Survey is helping fill in the gaps by using electronic equipment attached to a helicopter to scan below the surface, kind of like an MRI of the area.
There are certain materials in the subsurface that allow for groundwater to flow more easily through, and those are typically coarse grain materials like sands and gravels. The finer grain materials like silts and clay, those typically inhibit water flow.
Knowing the type of materials below the surface makes a big difference in where we can store water.
It's important to know where those areas are in the subsurface so that you know how to manage the groundwater resource.
This should prove particularly helpful for areas like the Central Valley, where data from 1998 to 2018 show overpumping dropping groundwater levels by over 2.5 feet a year. But it's much better news for the nearly 2 million people relying on water from the American River Basin.
Our region stands apart from most of the rest of the state in that we've seen our groundwater levels increasing.
Due in part to projects like the Regional Water Authority's Water Bank, an underground natural reservoir 2 times the size of Folsom Lake, a climate resiliency project addressing the changing cycle of weather by storing water in wet periods and only tapping into it during dry periods.
Climate change is our most significant challenge, right? So our mission is to ensure that those 2 million people, when they go to the tap and they turn it on, there's water that comes out.
Storing water underground not only adds more flexibility, but a bigger water portfolio throughout the entire state.
That's our moonshot in the state of California. That's our ability to address the weather whiplash.